all-conquering love, in the spiritual leadership of Jesus, in the supreme worth of every human personality, in the authority of truth known or to be known, and in the power of men of goodwill and sacrificial spirit to overcome all evil and progressively establish the kingdom of God. Neither this nor any other statement shall be imposed as a creedal test, provided that the faith thus indicated be professed. You can tell by the last sentence that they were still proto-Unitarian Universalists. But this is what Universalist congregations recited in unison every single Sunday. Most of the folks at the convocation had been Universalists before the merger, and they all very fondly recalled that faith. They are now proud and committed Unitarian Universalists, but believe that Universalism still has a great deal to offer to our denomination and to the world. And the purpose of Universalism was literally to establish the kingdom of God on earth, the kingdom of eternal and all-conquering love. These days, UUs being who we are, you'd get almost as many answers to the question of what Universalism means as there are UUs to ask. In her moving and inspiring keynote speech at the convocation, Reverend Naomi King declared that Universalism's primary message calls us to lead lives of bold compassion and work to create tangible hope for the people and the planet that are perishing, particularly for those in this moment who are being shunned, excluded, neglected, and left behind, guided by great and abiding love. And UUA President Peter Morales agrees, urging us to speak about Universalism in terms of compassionate love for all people. Most UUs would probably respond similarly to the same question, what is Universalism? Perhaps also including the inherent worth and dignity of every person, or the belief that all major faith traditions are equally valid. I would certainly agree with all of the above, though in my case, tending as I do to come at things from a slightly different angle, I'd respond that rather than being equally valid, all major faith traditions are equally invalid, including the faith tradition of rationality and science. Human beings are incapable, in my opinion, of fully understanding very much at all of absolute reality, of reality as it really is. Each major tradition does its best to comprehend that reality and express it in the idiom of the culture of which it is a part, and all succeed gloriously so long as you take their expressions as what they are, as poetry and metaphor and myth. All anyone really can do, though, in my personal belief, to be in harmony with actual reality, to live as lovingly, is to live as lovingly, as selflessly toward every other human being as you can, to live love. For love, of course, is the core and the connection between Universalism and radical selflessness. And when you get right down to it, of everything else of meaning in human life. I personally came to that conclusion that love is the sole source of meaning without knowing anything whatsoever about Universalism. And I had determined to live my life as completely as possible according to the implications of that conclusion back in the mid-90s. Some of you may recall that I addressed this congregation a number of years ago on the subject of radical selflessness, which I equate with love, and how the search for meaning and a place to live out meaning upon my return to this culture after 12 years of living in Japan, sandwiched on either side by 3 years of backpacking in Europe and in Southeast Asia, led me on a quixotic quest to see if I couldn't find a couple of other UUs who might be interested in helping me create a Unitarian Universalist monastic community. I never found any. But the quest led me to Murray Grove, which, as you can tell, was a very good fit, and where I continue to be, to my knowledge, and less than half-jokingly, the world's only UU monk. I won't repeat the details of that talk, but at that time, I defined radical selflessness as behaving not in our own self-interest, and also not in the self-interest of any other selves, but in the interest of loving and cultivating love. And that's pretty much how I define it today. And having come to that conclusion, having truly embraced the faith that only love has meaning, and further that really only love is real, the only rational course of action left to me is living my life to the extent that I'm able according to that faith. Living love. And the opposite of love is ego. And ego has created our world. I'd like to offer you my own personal creation myth. Actual reality, that which is really real, is vastly more immense and complex than human beings are capable of even beginning to comprehend. We are stuck on one tiny, insignificant planet in one tiny, insignificant corner of a tiny-ish, insignificant galaxy lost in the immense vastness of the physical universe. This vastly immense universe in all its physicality is comprised of one thing and one thing only, what we have come to call energy. Energy acting and interacting with itself in and as the infinite variety of forms and patterns of patterns and patterns of patterns of patterns that we have come to call subatomic particles and atoms and molecules and fields and waves and planets and galaxies. Other than energy, nothing exists. The range of possible sensory inputs available to us, stuck here on our tiny, insignificant planet, based upon and emerging from and as all that energetic patterned interactivity, inputs of light and sound and smell and sensation, is overwhelmingly greater than our human senses are capable of registering. Just ask your neighborhood cat or dog. Even the range of inputs that our human senses are capable of registering and send cascading in every instant to our human brains is overwhelmingly greater than those brains are capable of dealing with. And that's not even to mention the possibility that the input from the senses, limited though it may be, could conceivably not even be accurate at all. The brain, stuck inside its bony shell, has no way of knowing what's really out there or isn't. The least religious, most utterly rational person in the world is still, of necessity, a person of deep and abiding faith. They have to have a belief and a trust which informs everything they do and everything they are. Faith that what their brain and their senses are telling them about the world that they think they live in is in fact correct. That faith is misguided. Their faith in reason and rationality is just as invalid, is just as much poetry and metaphor and myth as any other. Our brains, or more accurately, the brains of our evolutionary ancestors, in an attempt to make some sense out of all these inputs and deal with them in some way, have evolved a consciousness dimly and rudimentarily at first. Eventually, this consciousness evolved dimly and rudimentarily at first, using patterns of brain chemistry and patterns of behavior based on that chemistry, and then even more complicated patterns and patterns of patterns into an ego, a conscious awareness of self as an individual self distinct from all other individual selves, none of which, except the chemistry, has the slightest bit of physical reality, though it can certainly impact physical reality. Ego doesn't really exist. It is a pattern and a pattern of instinctual and learned behaviors. However, ego makes us think that it not only exists, but that it is the center point of existence, because it made us as we are and caused us to evolve as we have. And the primary need of ego, the primary goal of ego, is its own survival and aggrandizement. Not our health, not really even our survival, its survival. Ego acts always and only in its own interest. Firstly, to strengthen and glorify itself. And secondly, but only secondly, to ensure the health and survival of the individual it inhabits and identifies. That would be us. Self-consciousness and ego, to help ensure that individual health and survival, has caused us to evolve over time species and sex and pair bonding and family and culture and society and tribe and nation. Economics, politics, war, genocide, racism, sexism, homophobia, horrors and cruelties of every kind. Art, music, dance, philosophy, religion, literature, science, fashion, sports, beer, fine wine, fine dining, movies, TV, the internet, the entire mess, and the entire glory. And none of it is particularly real or meaningful in and of itself, especially if you take it too seriously. I can't honestly say I know any of that for certain, and I certainly can't prove it, but I believe it. It's my faith. There is meaning, though, according to my faith, and that meaning stems from love. And love is selflessness. Love is the direct experience of the essential non-reality of the ego. There is no self. Selflessness, love, is experienced at those moments of fullest concentration of fullest engagement, of fullest being, when consciousness of self ceases.